In this video, we're going to set up Power Automate to link our Excel spreadsheet in SharePoint to the SharePoint list in question. So what we've done so far is we've created this Excel spreadsheet that's housed in our course repository list. I've put in some dummy lines of potential course materials, so you should have something filled out here in order to test the flow. And then our SharePoint list at the moment is empty, as it should be. I'm here on our GitHub page down to the Power Automate section. You have the link to Power Automate here. And then one of the first steps that I've already have established, because I've been using Power Automate, is to establish your Power Automate connections. So what this means is connecting your Excel Online and your SharePoint to Power Automate with your accounts. And so when you get to the landing page for Power Automate, it looks like this. You can sign in. And then on the left-hand side, you're going to see this tab called Data, and then go down to Connections. And from here, you can follow the instructions on GitHub to make new connections and add SharePoint and Excel business here. After you've done that, you should be able to successfully connect Power Automate to all of your other accounts. All right, since I've already done that, I'm going to scroll past this section and start with this creating a workflow in Power Automate, which you can follow with the text. It's the same content we're going to be talking about in this video. So what I have gone ahead and done already in the previous steps is I've downloaded the zip file from GitHub that contains the workflow that we're going to use. So now I'm going to go back to Power Automate, click My Flows, and I'm going to add a new flow. I'm going to import a package. And then I'm going to upload. I'm going to find this course repository template. It's a zip file. Give that a second to upload. All right. And now we'll see here that after you've created those connections with your accounts, you're going to have to make sure that they're verified here. So import setup. Okay, it's listing. What we're going to do here is create as new. And I'm going to call this the pronunciation repository flow. Save that. Here, I am going to make sure that the account that I'm using is linked here. And now you can go ahead and click import. Give this a moment to load. And if you get any errors here, that means that you probably did not set up your connections correctly or did not set up both of the connections to the Excel business and also to the SharePoint. So you'll want to go back and double check those. And again, these have to be part of the accounts that are linked to your organization for them to work. All right, so everything looks good here. We got green check marks. Great. So now we're going to go to Open Flow. And in the future, if you want to go find these flows, go to My Flow. I'm going to sign in again. Now it's loading. All right, so this is what the skeleton of the flow looks like. So we provided you with the basis for what you need to make this flow work, to connect that Excel spreadsheet to that SharePoint list so that it updates on a consistent basis. And what you're going to do at this point is customize it so that it's linking to your account, to your spreadsheets that you need it to run with. So we're going to go through each of the nodes here. So I call each of these boxes a node here in the tree. The recurrence node is going to be set up to run your flow at least once a week. I would keep it at that. You could even do once a month. I wouldn't suggest running every single day, especially if you have a really, really long list that perhaps has thousands of rows. But if you do need to update this, just make sure you go to edit. You can change the frequency, and you can change the time that it runs every week or whenever you so choose. We do also provide some comments up here about what each node is for, and we give you some guidance in terms of whether you're going to need to edit any of the content in the node or you can skip. I'm going to close that back up. All right, the next node is going to go to that Excel spreadsheet that is relevant for you, the one that you created earlier in your course repository. So you're probably going to see information like this, just like as a placeholder that we've set up in the zip file. So what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to update these. And what's nice is once you've updated these fields, you'll be able to auto-populate the other fields. So what I need to do is I need to find my group in SharePoint. So make sure that you pick the correct SharePoint. Then you're going to go and find the place where you've left that Excel spreadsheet. Remember, for this video, I created a second version of the course repository, so I want to make sure that I go there. And now we're going to find that Excel spreadsheet that I created, which is right here. And then for table, usually this should auto-populate. If it doesn't, the default is as table. So we can do that. And if you want to see show advanced options here, we don't have to do anything down here. So what we've gone ahead here is called this pronunciation course spreadsheet here. All right, let's move on to the next step. Here, we're going to tell Power Automate that we want to create an array with the rows in the Excel spreadsheet. So you don't have to do anything here. Everything's set up for you. We've gone ahead and named this array my Excel keys. We go to the next node. Here, what we're doing is we're calling that Excel spreadsheet the data in there, so you don't need to change this. Here, you have the column names from the Excel spreadsheet. There should be no reason to update these. We can go make sure that the spelling is okay for everything here, and it is. So I'm going to leave this as is. However, once you get to the point where you feel comfortable customizing your columns, you can go ahead and you're going to have to come in here and change each of these labels. And when you click here, you're going to see this window pop up here. You'll be able to type in whatever column name you are looking for, and it should pop up there, and you'll click that and make sure that you have it here in between these two quotation marks. But I'm not going to do anything at this point. We're going to go down here. Also, these column names should correspond to the ones up here and the ones in your spreadsheet. So there's nothing to do at this point here. And then down here, what we're doing is we're calling that array my Excel keys, and we're calling the information in that array. All right, so that we can use it later. Let's go ahead and close that node. Now we're going to get the content from the Sharepoint list, this one. So right now there's nothing in it. However, down the line, when you're running the workflow on a regular basis, there will presumably be content here. So you're going to need to call it, and we'll talk about why in a few steps. So here, what you're going to do is you're going to make sure again that you're pointed to the correct website for your organization and the SharePoint. And then you're going to make sure that you're calling the right list name. So ours here is called Pronunciation Course. And here what I have is I've extended the top count to almost 5,000 because that's the number of rows, the maximum number of rows that can be read. So that's also why we split our courses up into multiple list is that if once you get into the high thousand number of rows for course materials, SharePoint is not really good at handling that for updating your SharePoint list. So what you're going to find is you're not going to find a complete list of the course materials if you go over 4,999 rows. So that should already be filled in for you. But we have a reminder up here. All right, and now we're going to do the same thing we did with Excel spreadsheet. We're going to create an array of your SharePoint keys. That should already be set up for you. We're going to move to the next node where you're going to do the same thing you did with the Excel spreadsheet. We're going to populate the SharePoint keys array. So you have your values here. You shouldn't need to touch that. We're going to double check all of these. Okay, so these should match your SharePoint list columns. As you can see here, because by default there is some hidden version column in SharePoint lists, I've had to add this underscore here in order for it to allow me to use the same name. So I'm going to go back to my flow and make sure here that this one has the underscore as well. So, all right, that should be correct. And everything else is fine. Again, if you're using different column names, you're going to have to make sure that you update these different columns here. And just as before, the JSON should have the same names as the titles. This one doesn't need the underscore because we're referring here to this title. You'll just want to make sure that if you change the column names in Compose, that you update them in parse JSON. And then here, again, we don't have to do anything. You have your SharePoint keys and we're calling the body. So we're pulling out all of the content that's in that array. Let's close this node. We're getting close to the end here. Okay, so the next node you're creating is this intersection array. Okay, so what that means is we're going to call the Excel spreadsheet information and the SharePoint information. We're going to pull those arrays that we've created with the different rows that have our course materials, and we're going to compare them, right? So that's what this intersection does here. It's already filled in for you in the expressions, but as you can see, we're comparing the array my SharePoint keys and my Excel keys, and we're finding the intersection. We're finding the overlap between those two different data forms. So nothing to do here. All right, now this is where the intersection is important. What we're going to do is we're going to check whether the SharePoint items are in the Excel spreadsheet. If they are not, then we're going to delete them. That means we've updated that Excel spreadsheet and we've said, hey, there's these course materials that nobody uses any longer. They're not relevant to this course. We've moved them somewhere else. And so what this step does is it notices these missing elements, missing from the Excel spreadsheet, that are in the SharePoint list, and it deletes them from the SharePoint list. So we have the value here from our SharePoint list. We have called the column names that we need to compare. Remember that I had to update the version column, so we're going to do that again. Okay, check the JSON, should be all good. And then here is where we have our conditions. So these are mostly set up for you already. This is your intersection array, no need to touch that. Here's the body that you're pulling, the content. Basically what it's saying is that if the intersection here, if we don't have any items, or if all the items line up, if the intersections look the same, then there's nothing to do. If yes, nothing happens. If no, however, if you do find that there's materials in the SharePoint list that do not exist in the Excel spreadsheet, then what it's going to do is it's going to say, okay, this is the answer to this is false, it's no. We're going to delete that item. So we need to make sure that the site address is pointing to our organization SharePoint and that the list name is the appropriate one, and ID here should be correct. So we've updated this one. Then finally, one of the most important steps, if we want to keep updating our Excel spreadsheets and our SharePoint lists, is that we need to take a look at the intersection array, and we need to add any items that are new in the Excel spreadsheet that do not exist yet in the SharePoint list. So we're calling the Excel key array, and then we also have this conditional here. So you have your intersection array. You'll see here that this is the current item that you're looking at. So this is within this node here, so no need to change any of that. If yes, if all of the intersection items line up, if there is everything that is listed in an Excel spreadsheet is listed in the SharePoint list, then it's going to say true and there's no action for Power Automate to take. However, if there are items in the Excel spreadsheet that are not in the SharePoint list, then we're going to get a false. It's going to track this way, the flow will. So you'll open up create item, and this is where you're going to probably have to do some work. So you're going to make sure that the site address is the appropriate one. Again, make sure that the list name is the appropriate one. And now you're going to have to make sure that all of these line up with the correct item that you want to list. So what you're probably going to find is if you keep all of the columns the same, that you're not going to have issues here and you might not need to do any work at this point. However, if you do create new column names, you're going to have to go in here and you're going to have to go to the expression. And if you go back to our GitHub, we've provided down below in the appropriate step the expression that you'll have to use in order to link the right information. So I've copied and pasted this line here, and I'll go to expression and I'll paste it here. But now you have to make sure that your column names are right. So since we're in title, this will need to be title, and this will also need to be title. So make sure that that matches whatever column name is over here and press OK. And you'll see down here too, we have this special expression. This is because since this is a hyperlink, it does funky things sometimes if we don't kind of treat it as such. So we also have the expression down here for connected files that is going to end up looking more like this little pink, mauve, red, something field here. So just make sure that looks like that if you have your hyperlink fields that need connection there. So again, if your columns are completely different, you're going to have to go through one by one and copy and paste that expression. Make sure you update both spaces where the column name needs to go. And once you have done that, you are ready to test the flow. So what we're going to go ahead and do is I'm going to save down here at the bottom. And now that I've saved, I'm going to test it. Okay, our flow is disabled, so we are going to have to enable it. In order to do that, I'm going to use this arrow to go back to the home page for the flow. Give it a second to load, and I'm going to turn it on down here. So go ahead and turn on. And now we can try running the flow. So here's the flow checker. It says we don't have any errors here. So we're good to try it out. I'm going to go ahead and from this screen, I'm going to press run. So this is how you manually run the Power Automate flow to check it. If you've done updates, if you're getting errors and need to troubleshoot, you can always run it on your own. Or if you've done, included a lot of changes in your spreadsheet and you don't want to wait for that week until the flow is automatically supposed to run, you can run it manually here. So I'm going to go down here and click Run Flow, and then I can go to the Flow Runs page. and it's going to give me information about the run itself. All right, so we're going to go, this one's running, so this is the one we're interested in. I'm going to click here so that I can see how the flow is proceeding. And what this allows you to do, again, when we're talking about troubleshooting, is to make sure that we can pinpoint if we run into an error or a problem where it's happening. So we're getting all these green check marks, which is a good sign, and it says that your flow ran successfully. So what we should see now, in theory, is that the Sharepoint list is updated, and oh my goodness, yes it is. So we have all the information that is in this spreadsheet, which is exactly what we were looking for. So this is great. And you can tell which lines are new because they have these little 3 lines here, kind of indicating that that's new information. We have our links here. All of the columns are matching up with the content in that column, all of the column names. So that looks good. So our flow has been successful. If you had gone through here and seen any X's, what you can do, that means that's where the error occurred, is you'll open up that part of the flow, and it should usually be able to take you to the step in which that error occurred. And that's how you can start to pinpoint perhaps a step that you missed, or maybe there is a typo in your column names, but that'll kind of lead you to starting out how to, on your own, solve the workflow. All right, so because that ran so nicely, what we're going to do now is we're going to test it by going to this spreadsheet that, we would update every once in a while. We're going to say, let's see, I'm going to add information here and say that this is going to be week 7 content. Okay, so that'll be new. I'm going to delete this row. And then I'm going to add another one. So we're going to talk about here, I'm going to fill in some dummy information. So I'm just going to use one of these. We're going to say it's a PDF. Let's go and use the intonation one here. All right, so what we've done, as you've seen, is we've edited one of these cells, we've deleted one of our rows, and we've added a new row. So we want to make sure now that our flow runs in the way that we've set it up, which means that we are going to want to see these changes reflected in this list. Because right now what we have is the older information. So let's try running this again. We can click resubmit here. Oh, yep. Looks like things are moving. So the very first time you run this, because you're populating the Sharepoint list, it's going to go very quickly, especially because there's nothing here to compare. But you'll see that if you are actually watching the this page for the flow to run, that it's going to take a little bit longer the more content that you have in your Excel spreadsheet and Sharepoint lists. But according to this, those changes were very easy to implement. So fingers crossed. Let's go back and check here. So we've added a week 7. Yep, this has been updated. We deleted one of the word stress lines. So what I'm going to do, okay, we have 12 rows here, and I know that we have 12 rows in here. So I had deleted one and added a new one. So looks like that line got deleted, and I added this one down here. Excellent. So it looks like the flow is running perfectly. And so what you should see again is as you're updating this spreadsheet over the course of the semester, every week if you so choose, whatever system you set up for yourself and for your organization, then you're going to see that those changes get updated in the Sharepoint list again, and everyone can have access to this. I would suggest restricting access to this to a few people in case you don't want people kind of going in there accidentally changing things or formatting. And this is the kind of interface that you would share with the majority of your team so that they can go in and look up the materials for each course. But essentially, that is what these Power Automate flows will allow you to do. And at this point, you should be able to successfully run the Power Automate flow if you're using the same column names. Like I said, there are some considerations if you're changing the Power Automate, if you're changing the column names in your spreadsheets and in your SharePoint lists. However, we've provided that line of code, that expression that should allow you to link your SharePoint and your Excel column names together. I hope that was helpful.